Hey, this is Sabrina, Monarch of Monarch Astrology and Magic of the Spheres podcast, and I just want to be transparent with you. I am going to be talking about the new moon in Sagittarius, but this is probably my eighth or ninth take sitting here trying to talk about it because I keep just like fumbling over my words or having like a moment. And I think that that has something to do probably with the current astrology and also maybe the transmission that's actually trying to come through me. So I figured, Groundhog Day, I've been trying to record and get it right. Like this is my ninth take or whatever the fuck. So we're just gonna go for it this time, including all the berserk like things that are coming through my channel at the moment. So we're talking about a new moon in Sagittarius on December 1st. It is part of a stellium with Eros and Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, who is, the convenient thing that I could blame for my issues with speaking right now. But this Eros theme is going to be significant and important for this lunar cycle because at the full moon, the sun and Eros will be exactly conjunct at 23 degrees. So I love an Eros lunation. If you've followed me for a while, you know that I've done a lot of research on Eros and the Eros and Psyche myth. And so it's kind of um, it's like a holiday for me to have like an Eros lunation so I can talk about this asteroid and whatnot. Anyway, the lunation is going to be trining a stationing Mars in Leo. And yeah, Mars is going to station retrograde in about a week. And then we also have a square to Saturn in Pisces, as well as a wide opposition to Jupiter retrograde in Gemini. So, what I want to talk about first is like, who is Eros and what's the vibe with Eros and Sagittarius? So, Eros or Cupid is the god who would strike people with arrows that made them fall madly in love or lust. So, there's this feeling with Eros of being taken over by passion and how, in our human experience, Eros is very significant and important to us. It's what, makes us feel alive. And then there's also like, how do we relate to our own passion? How do we not burn out on it, right? To go too extreme to the point where we can't contain it, we can't actually really hold it. Or, the other extreme is when Eros is repressed and we can't feel our passion or excitement. We have like a layer of, depression or numbness or anhedonia covering up our ability to feel really deeply alive. And what I've noticed about this archetype is that, Eros kind of asks us to feel a lot of things, like to have a range, that we don't just get to pick our desired feelings and discard the other ones, but that actually there is Eros on the other side of grief. That grief makes way for deeper opening and love, right? Or that there's a kind of power or clarity on the other side of anger, or, what have you. You can pick any, difficult emotion, humiliation, huge sensation. And the way that there is like a humor or like an ability to lose a part of ourselves or to, lose a layer of our inner persecutor when we move through that gate of humiliation and realize that we don't need to hold on to that part of ourselves that is embarrassed in the first place. So when I think about Eros and Sagittarius, I am also thinking about um, the aliveness that takes the shape of being a lot, like being a big personality, being someone who's a little bit unwieldy, someone that just says what's on their mind, someone that has a big mouth, someone who has a big sense of humor, someone who is maybe kind of dramatic, someone who's just, a lot. And how, if you think about that character type, yeah, they ruffle feathers. Yeah, they can be annoying or something, but people generally like it. Like there's a sense of the endearing quality of, this person who's just kind of letting it all hang out. And when people have that energy, right, if they already have a lot of access to just letting this thing like move through them and move through their lives, they're probably learning how to refine it or channel it as well, if it's been causing a lot of blowups or dramas or things like that. Or maybe you have the situation where you're craving to be more expressed, where you want to, unfold yourself from like a tight pretzel that you're in and you want to be a lot. And I think that this lunation is going to have something to do with that desire for feeling more alive, whether that's looking at like our external circumstances and how, our life looks like on the outside, maybe like how, what we're doing, if you will. And then also the internal side of that, of how we feel inside of the doing, like how we feel within ourselves. And this dynamic of, is the thing that's wanting to come through us being freely expressed, or does it keep getting squished down? And so this also led me to think about truth as a Sagittarius theme and how moving with truth creates, next steps. So if you're honest with yourself, right? So even being honest with ourselves, honest about like what's happening internally, what are my sensations, what do I feel? This kind of self-knowledge, self-intimacy, I think is really key in general, but being highlighted this new moon. But then also communicating that and conveying it to others, speaking what's true, speaking what's happening, having that attunement to the truth and not even, being in our own delusions or webs or whatnot. But basically what gets set in motion when we're honest, how that gives other people the opportunity to participate or not, how that sets in motion a chain of events. And I'm thinking about also the repression of that, how, when we don't want to, when we're trying to manage other people's responses, we're trying to control the situation, we're trying to control outcomes, that we might be more prone to hiding information or concealing information, which is different than letting the truth come out. And so when we're living in accordance with distortions or non-truths, and we've created this whole web, at identity, associations, social networks, a lifestyle, we keep having to repress our true experience. And then the truth becomes increasingly high sensation and threatening because it feels like it's going to blow up our lives in some way. As we, develop this path, like, just, I guess, to ground it a little bit in the new moon, it's like there's something about maybe an intention that we could be setting about living in greater alliance with our truth, or the thing that brings us alive, or the thing that we were put here on this planet to do, right? Or the thing that just resonates at this like vital level within us. And also deep frustration with where we feel out of alignment with that. And so I'm thinking about also this process of, as we come out or emerge or share in the world some part of us that we've been keeping hidden, right? That's we're starting to feel the call to express ourselves. Our body has to go along with that. So sometimes people will keep the truth or their authentic, nature or whatnot hidden because it feels so threatening at a body sensation level to be with the charge of revealing that which we otherwise conceal. So perhaps for this lunation, consider where in your life you feel this kind of edge of like something that's a little bit, exciting, true, or it feels like the pulse, the next thing. but it maybe challenges the presentation that you've already, created, or there's something that's deeply sensational or vulnerable about it. So recently, I received an EFT tapping session that was really powerful. It was a really big breakthrough for me. I was asked some very penetrating questions that definitely hit a spot, a place of immense emotion that had been difficult for me to hold or access myself. And there was also a shame there that I didn't even really lucidly know about. Like it wasn't at the top of my mind. So when I was asked the question and it hit that spot, my heart rate started going up. And soon I was in tears and having this massive breakthrough. The thing is, like the container, the setting was very conducive to a breakthrough and to an opening. I had no motive to lie or not share the answer to that pointed question. I wanted to feel better, like that thing was wanting to come up and out. But I know that maybe like there are other times in my life where being asked a pointed question, I wouldn't have felt safe to answer truthfully because, maybe as a kid or something, I could get in trouble, or even later in life, not wanting to deal with the consequences of sharing the truth. And so having that, heart rate, that high sensation, that thing come up and then just stuff it back down, like, I don't want to, deal with this. And we all have our own processes to arrive at greater honesty. But I do think that we might get to a point where we eventually like hunt the thing instead of running away from it. So getting excited about that, like, oh, like what is actually that true thing here in this place that I ordinarily conceal or lie to myself or lie to others. And to consider, these things often form developmentally in our personality around perceived threats. And I think that Sagittarius, when I think about the Eros of Sagittarius and that person who's a lot, that person who's very expressed, even a little bit clumsy, like Sagittarius energy just spreads itself out, doesn't necessarily care about offending people, isn't trying to put itself in a tight box. And so it squares the sign of Virgo, which could be where we find more perfectionist tendencies or the ability to be very conscientious and meticulous and organized. And I find that Sagittarius consciousness like has a hard time fitting into small boxes. Like sometimes they just can't even figure it out. So they're like, I'm just gonna be big and take up space and be a lot because this is my nature and I can't do anything about it. Like its nature is to be expansive. And I think that when we are, Jupiter and Sagittarius relates to truth and deceit, at a higher level truth, but it's also the ways that we believe things that aren't true, or we lie to ourselves, or we create these kind of epic rationalizations that aren't real. And when we build a web with those rationalizations or the non-truths or whatnot, it's motivated by some desire. It's like it's trying to get us a particular result. It's different than the real current of truth within ourselves, or like the real current of how life wants to move through us. And the way that when we just let that thing rip, it will shape our lives and it will create, conflicts or disruptions or openings. It will open doors, it will close doors, like it will do things for us that aren't exactly in our control. And again, for when people actually have a lot of access to this kind of explosive, like I'm just going to express myself energy, it can be messy. And there are ways to channel it more so that it's not creating unnecessary explosions or whatnot. But again, I think there's something here about like there's almost like a humility inside of it in a Sagittarius way of like, I can't help what my nature is. I can't help what my truth is. Like, and if I just let it express, life will have the opportunity to meet me there. And the deeper journey, the one that is more vulnerable, the one that's actually more intimate, right? Like if people see you for who you are and not for who you want them to see you as, it hits a different spot. One that we often have defense structures around and whatnot. So in sum, with this like Eros theme for the new moon, it's like think about what's happening around your relationship and desire to feel alive and how this is connected to how honest or dishonest you're being. And that you do not necessarily have to make a big, you don't have to blow up your life and like reveal some big hidden truth, but to be intimate with what's the next step, what is the way you can move in alignment, right? What is the maybe pocket of sensation that's ready to be opened when you lean into the direction that you're truly being called to? Sometimes the path does call for big, like dramatic things. I've definitely had that happen and I don't regret it. But there's different ways to go about it. So I want to also share some thoughts on the new moon and its connection to the malefic planets because it's trine Mars and Leo and also square Saturn and Pisces. So the Eros influenced new moon, again, Eros is actually about like aliveness and pleasure, but it's also about all of our high sensation feelings and emotions and our ability to be alive within the full spectrum of our life. And the malefic planets relate to extreme difficulties. And not that they aren't useful or important. It's like Mars relating to heat. Um, we love to get warm by the fire. We like our stove and our oven and whatnot. We cook our food, we prepare it with knives. Like sharp is also a Mars quality. Saturn can be, cold and dry and relate to limitations and withholding and, places boundaries. And so it might feel cold, right? And also boundaries might be supportive or create the necessary container or constraint for our creative needs. So if connecting with the pulse of truth, Sagittarius, Eros, means that we experience a kind of discomfort, maybe heat in our body or some level of, sharpness or intensity or consequence, Saturn, that might be part of it, just as kind of a broad overview considering the malefics. What about also cutting through the fog, like the confusion or the mist, and that kind of sharp or cold clarity? This could also be connected to the processes where our frustration, anger, pain, grief, sadness, numbness, depression, any subjectively undesired sensation may trigger us to try to do something to avoid it or fix it, perhaps instead of just traveling into it. Because there are repressive elements to society that we've picked up culturally, or we're often wired just biologically to avoid pain. It's usually a learning process to, learn how to include, incorporate, encompass these other things, and find the, Eros inside of them. So an example could be like if you're the kind of person who, at like an event, there's a dance floor or something like that. Like if you need a moment or a little bit to like actually warm up, and maybe you're a good dancer anyway, but that feeling of like you're not just on and like fully into it the second the music starts, that you maybe move through a layer of feeling crunchy or uninspired or kind of insecure about what other people think about you or whatever the thing is. And then there's a way of meeting that layer and going to the next thing. So maybe consider, because this is an Eros inspired lunation, what skills, tools do you have at your disposal to connect with what is emerging and arising for you? Because if the impulse is to just repress or avoid something, often we need something that will support us in leaning in and engaging. So I thought about play, for example, which is different. If you're moving through the world in order to specifically get something done or be effective, there's certain poses that you enter through your body, through space and time to, get stuff done or to be effective. And there's a habit inside of that, maybe, versus when you experiment or engage yourself and the world in new ways. That's another way of saying play, right? Like you might open up a pocket of discovery or emotion, something that might emerge spontaneously. And so again, even with like the dance metaphor, just moving intuitively or like dancing freely, like emotions, things come up to be processed. Making art, making art with an art form that you're not technically skilled at, so you don't have any control. Making up a ritual or a ceremony and just experimenting, being in a new space, right? Or, you can have some creative intention or something that you're trying to discover within it. But I think that there's a desire with this new moon that I'm suspecting is there around feeling more alive and feeling like we can take up more space within ourselves and within our lives. And so if we have these kind of habitual boxes that we operate in, there is something that's wanting us to maybe try something else or be experimental or be spontaneous. And that can happen in a lot of ways. Another few things I want to mention about the malefics in relationship to the new moon. I think there's some maybe creative frustration with Mars and Leo, or a desire and an urge to be having more fun or to feel more expressed. Might be creating a pressure, motivation to let loose, in trying to the Sagittarius themes. And so whether that is something that you're currently doing or feel like you have space for, or if it's just that pressure point of like, I need, some kind of creative release. There may be a need for immediate or shorter term relief or expression, but also a long game visioning of what might need to change for us to feel inspired and excited about our life in the longer term. And, there's like a duality here of like both, yeah, maybe what you're doing on the outside, but we do also have to locate our own internal alignment. And when we play the inner game and like connect to the frequency or the energy that wants to move through us internally, it's a lot easier to align with external options. But also our environment conditions how we feel. So if you make changes to your environment or to your schedule or to who you're around, you can facilitate internal experiences also. There's a possibility that some things are going very slow at the moment because Mars is stationing, right? And we can't rush it. There's an intelligence in the slowness. There may be a lot of reflection happening around what our spirit needs to feel more alive and resourced. So a difference between like security needs, like money, safety, shelter, etc., and like what your heart needs, like what your spirit needs, what at a higher level is really giving you life. And so lastly, I want to sum this up with some reflection on the new moon's ruler, being Jupiter retrograde in Gemini, and that Jupiter is still square Saturn in Pisces. Mars is also slowing down to go retrograde, and Mercury is retrograde. All of these influences point to slowness. And it's not that things aren't still happening. It's not that you might not be making moves. It's that there's a deeper wave right now of reconfiguration around our beliefs, our worldview, and how we want to organize our lives from a visionary, paradigmatic standpoint. Things like, what's the story you're telling about your life? What's the story you're living out? And how, actually impactful and influential that is. And there's like a deeper quest for meaning that's happening right now. At a high level, I think this could also be a quest to contact a greater source of energy or fuel. I've been talking about Eros, but pleasure and love and fun are high energy sources. There are certain ways that we can remember that we're love, for example, and just not have to get it, but just be it and tap into something that we actually have access to. We just have to unlock, whatever is blocking it. But practically also, this could look like moving toward actual concrete things in your life that give you more energy or relate to your excitement. I'll share with you something that, like, when it comes to how I've like followed my impulses around my business the last like 10 years, I was always inclined to invest in things that I felt like I needed, whether that was like personal healing, personal coaching, and beginning with less resources, I would do it with trades, or I would even kind of riskily spend money, and whatnot, because I felt like it was more important for me to lean into what was giving me life and what was giving me energy than to not. And so there was that kind of like risk where I'm just going to try this out, side, maybe a little bit of Leo kind of vibe in there. But if you think about like the part of our consciousness that organizes around feeling safe and secure and stable, and the priorities or the logic around that of like, well, I have this budget, or I need to stay, I need to get a good night's sleep or whatever, which are fair. That might be true. And sometimes there's something that just lights up our soul and we want to move toward it. And there's that like contraction and whatnot. So to think about like identifying what gives you more life and also identifying your willingness to move toward it, even if there's some risk associated with like maybe you'll feel like a fool if you fail, or maybe it's an investment and you're scared, or what have you, like that. Something about taking the leap and also committing to being the person that takes that necessary leap. But you'll know if you tap into your intuition about it and feel into what is it that your spirit needs. And this quest to contact a greater source of fuel or energy, which can be things like faith, love, pleasure, fun, these high fuel sources. It's like weird to talk about them that way, but because it sounds so dry almost, but it's like I've been noticing in the field. I made an Instagram reel about this too, just from talking with people, that where things are stable right now, like you're in your routine, or like maybe you're happy with your life in a variety of ways, or your job or whatnot, considering if you are, or, your family life or whatever it is, that there's this layer coming out where it's like not enough to just go through the motions. It's like there's a desire to feel alive inside of it. There's a desire for it to feel meaningful. And that is not necessarily accomplished by being sexier or having more or whatever like our mind or like ego wants to grasp onto. But it is attending to an internal opening of like How do we arrive at that place of gratitude? How do we arrive at that place of losing ourselves in ecstasy or having a good time? How do we feel pleasure, right? And looking at our lives and how congruent are our activities and investments with that pursuit? What are we experimenting with along these lines? So I think there might be, on the one hand, it's like this very Jupiter-Saturn square thing of like this quest, this desire to connect with more life or to connect with something bigger or vaster, connect with a vaster fuel source. And then also our willingness to commit and see the course and be on that path and be in our practice. So that's what I have for you. Let me know in the comments how this resonated with you. Please also like this video and subscribe to my channel. And also, if you've studied evolutionary astrology before with me in the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive, you are invited to an extraordinary opportunity, Diviner, a year-long advanced astrological salon. I'm so excited about it. We're starting January 5th. I'm going to leave the link in the show notes for you to see the invitation, the curriculum, and just what I'm inviting you into in this journey of the art of cultivating your oracle. So this is the month, really, December, to check that out and to apply. And the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive will be beginning again in April 2025 for those of you who like to plan ahead. I'll also leave the link to that course in the show notes. Thank you so much for watching. Do like this video and let me know what resonated with you.